What's up guys and welcome to the weekly Q&A. Just a heads up, we have a giveaway at the end of this video, so make sure you stick around for that.
First up, we're combining two questions into one. Omega Wolf asks if R2-D2 is sentient, now that we know that L3 basically is. And Cameron French asks if we're building towards some sort of droid revolution in future stories, or if the droids will just go off onto their own hero's journey.
I do think that R2-D2 is sentient. I think that kind of all droids are. Generally, I think if they don't get memory wipes, then yes, they gain sentience. And yeah, I think what they're kind of saying is that memory wipes are inhumane and that you're basically like keeping your foot down on the droids. And this is something that's been around since before L3. They've explored droid sentience, especially in like the C-3PO comic, where it has alluded to the idea that 3PO's memory wipes didn't really take, and that he remembers things like Naboo and serving Padme and Anakin and all that. So I do think that droids are sentient, and including the astromechs and probably even gonk droids.
Poor gonk droids. Yeah, has R2 ever been wiped?
Probably before episode 1, I would assume, but as far as we know, we've never seen him wiped.
Yeah. So that C-3PO comic, is that just kind of like a one-off comic? If you haven't checked that out, it's pretty good, and
I was surprised by it.
Yeah. It's emotional.
They say like, oh, this is basically, I guess, how he gets the red arm. Like, that's kind of how they sold it.
Yeah.
And I was not expecting them to go into droid consciousness and like how droids kind of work with or against their programming, and what does programming mean. It asks a lot of really interesting questions. So, yes, I do think that R2-D2 is sentient. Now to the second part of the question. Are we building towards some sort of droid revolution? I kind of was getting that impression, but I like Cameron's idea that this could be building towards like a droid hero. That kind of seems more like a Star Wars story to me, instead of like a Terminator uprising of the droids, which that's been something that's been visited in Star Wars Legends before. HK-47, IG-88, they've both like tried to start droid rebellions, but I kind of like the idea of a droid and his story, or her story, of gaining consciousness and going off and kind of going on their own adventure. And
it'd be like Wall-E or Iron Giant.
It's funny you mentioned that. The actual question that I didn't write in our script mentions Wall-E.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is a very good idea, and something that would be more fitting for Star Wars than what I was assuming that they might be building towards, which is, like Terminator, or like Cylons or something. But yeah, I like the idea of a hero's journey for a droid.
That would be interesting for maybe a TV show, future TV show, or an arc of a TV show.
Yeah, any of that. Maybe. Comic book, whatever. I don't know if they'd do a movie on it, but they've really been hitting it hard in the books and the comics, so I could see them keeping it in the written form somehow.
Yeah. Sebastian Pizarro and Brian Pizzuti both want to know what kind of connections we might get to see in the Fallen Order game. What is it? Star Wars Jedi
Fallen Order.
Fallen Order. Coming next year.
I think that the obvious ones are things that we've seen in the Darth Vader comic. Like the Inquisitors, their specialized clone troopers, all that kind of stuff. I think we'll probably see normal clone troopers as well. As for other Jedi, I don't know. Ahsoka, I really doubt, because we've read in the Ahsoka book that she's been off doing her own thing, and a lot of it is like trying to hide. So I don't think that at this point in time, immediately after Order 66, I don't think she'll be available in the way that she was for Star Wars Rebels. Other Jedi are a possibility, and
I could see maybe towards the beginning, one of the lesser known Jedi maybe showing up and giving the player a little bit of context and maybe like helping your character out a little bit, and then he or she gets taken out, and you're on your own.
Yeah, I could kind of see you having, yeah, exactly that. Like someone, like, I don't know, Oppo Rancisis. Like someone we've known, that'd be cool. Yeah. We've never seen him in action, but like maybe your master is someone that we would recognize, and then the tutorial mission is like a battle, and then your master gets offed, and you have to run off and survive.
Yeah.
So I do think we'll probably see some familiar faces. Bounty Hunters is something I had not considered, but I think would be interesting and good. They'd be some more formidable opponents, especially if you're playing a Padawan who should be kind of weaker. If you faced off with someone like Cad Bane, who has fought and survived against Jedi before, I think that could work well.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention this question because Elliot from Battlefront Updates and I recently talked about this game for like half an hour, and that video is on his channel, so I'll throw that up in the cards.
Cool. Along those same lines, Jake Showman asks, how many Jedi were alive prior to Order 66?
The answer is really simple. It's just about 10,000. So that's all we need to say, but I wanted to talk about that because it kind of fits in with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and we can talk about like how many of those 10,000 do we think survived Order 66, and then how many of them like were killed off in the continuing purge, how many of them survived until the time of the Galactic Civil War, that kind of thing. And I guess I want to start at the Galactic Civil War because I feel like it shouldn't be any more than we already know. Yeah. Obi-Wan, Yoda, Ahsoka, Ezra, and Kanan, even though technically they're not all Jedi, they're close enough. Like, I feel like that's a technicality.
Close enough.
Like, Ahsoka, yeah, sure, she left the Jedi Order. She wasn't a Jedi Knight. But, like, my point is always, Luke is desperately seeking someone to train him in between A New Hope and Empire. And if anyone is around that people know of, then that kind of, like, why wouldn't you point them in Luke's direction? Why wouldn't they be seeking him out? Especially if they heard about some crazy Force-sensitive kid that blew up the Death Star. So I hope that it's minimal. Yeah. At that point in time.
Yeah. And they go over a little bit of this in the comics, especially the Darth Vader comics, because there was a list of Jedi that they were still kind of looking for, and it was only a couple of names, but
I get the feeling that there was like a scroll button on that list that we didn't see.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure that there were more than, like, Quinlan Voss is on that list, a couple of new names. But yeah, that's kind of, how many Jedi do you think survived Order 66 specifically and then had to be hunted down by the Inquisitors? It's because obviously, like, they had to make the Inquisitorius, like, this group of at least 10 individuals that went hunting Jedi. So there were a hefty number, I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, I think if they're Jedi, they must be pretty good at hiding, so.
Right. How many do you think survived? Like, what would be your guess?
Out of the 10,000?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Well, how many were, like, in the main event?
The Clone Wars, or at the Temple, or
I guess
all of it?
At the Temple. Well, I don't even know where all the clones were at the time.
I mean, they were spread throughout the galaxy. Like, I would guess that maybe the idea is that 1% survived. Like, I think most of them were probably at the Temple or out in battles with clones. And then a handful of them, sort of like Kanan, got away, and then, I don't know. I just...
Don't ask me a question that you don't know.
Well, it's just something that we could discuss.
I have no idea.
I mean, yeah, we don't even know if the 10,000 included things like Padawans and younglings, and I kind of assumed that it does, but I don't know. It's just like, how many do you think the Inquisitors had to hunt down after the fact? I think I'd guess somewhere around 100.
Yeah, that's what came to mind, was about 100 maybe. So
1%. Yeah. That feels good to me. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. John Wayne wants to know what it means to be powerful in the Force.
This is something that I've talked about before. I have a video on just like power levels in the Force, and I talk about the gamification of Star Wars and how kind of people now sometimes view the Jedi as like this thing where you level up and gain XP and like unlock new powers, and I don't really think that's it. And this is about the Force, and I think everything about the Force comes down to your own personal interpretation. So what we're saying is not necessarily right or wrong, it's just how we view it.
Mm-hmm.
But I see power in the Force as kind of a always moving scale. Like, some days you're going to be really connected to the Force, and you're going to be really strong in it. You're going to be able to do things with it that no one else can. And with practice, you will continue to have that connection with the Force. But I think even the strongest Jedi would have days where they were just feeling off.
Not feeling it
yeah.
today.
I think that's exactly correct. You're making a joke, but I think that's right. Where it's just, someday something might happen and you feel angry, and you'd be more like in the dark side, I guess. Yeah, but I guess that's where...
That's what makes being a Jedi like something that is truly something to be respected, because they're kind of going through like a constant mental battle with themselves and constantly having to remind themselves, okay, the Force is both good and bad, and I have to find balance. And
yeah,
that's a lot of what they talk about in Rebels, between Kanan and Ezra. It's like, you gotta find balance. And Ezra's young, and he's kind of like, gets a little wild at times, and he has to be reminded that there's balance.
I think, yeah, when it comes down to it, if let's just look at Jedi and Sith, the power comes from the light and the dark, and the dark is powered by negative emotions. So anger and hatred and fear and all that. It's stuff that...
And pain.
Is easy to... Yeah, and pain. It's stuff that's easy to give into, and in the real world, it's easy to let that stuff take over your life. And the light side is all about serenity and peace and kind of all of the positive emotions, or at least, I mean, whether or not the Jedi are correct in this philosophy is another debate, but it's like, those things are harder to achieve, but ultimately I think that they are better to strive for. And I mean, I think that the Force is meant to parallel our own life and say, like, yeah, it's really easy to give into those bad things, but try not to. You're going to be happier if you go with the light side. And
yeah.
I really think that that's all that it means, because Star Wars is a parable that's supposed to teach us lessons. So that's where I think the power comes from, and whether or not you choose to take your power from your anger and your frustration, or from your positivity and your optimism and your relationships, is a decision everyone has to make.
Yeah, and there's also the idea of, like, different Jedi are stronger in some ways of the Force than others. So, like, Obi-Wan, I think, was better at kind of, like, the mind tricks, and Yoda was like a really powerful Jedi, but he hardly ever fought.
Yeah, everyone kind of has their own gifts and strengths, which also parallels real life. But
yeah, one of the things when we mention the emotions that drive the dark side, if you ever wondered in The Force Awakens when they're fighting in the woods, and Kylo Ren is punching his wound, it's like he's making himself be in more pain so that he can kind of harness a little bit more of that dark side.
Right. That's kind of like we did a video on that a long time ago where that's kind of our own headcanon, which I think works very well.
Yeah.
I choose to believe that, but I've also seen people like, it could just be that he's like pumping up his adrenaline. Sure, that works too. But yeah. I mean, in the context of Star Wars, I like to think that it's Force related, but yeah.
Tobin Lamb asks if someone has to be Force sensitive to build a lightsaber.
I think yes. We haven't seen any examples in canon of someone just putting one together. The best thing I can think of is in the kind of much derided book Heir to the Jedi, which has some iffy stuff in it, but one thing I do clearly remember is Luke finds another lightsaber and he decides to take it apart and learn how it works. And he does so, and he breaks it. And he can't put it back together because the crystals need like that kind of fine tuning through the Force. And he doesn't have that ability yet. He doesn't have that control yet. so he can't put the crystals back in place to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's all that I need to think that you need force sensitivity in order to build a lightsaber.
Isn't there an episode of the Clone Wars where it's kind of like in Harry Potter where they go to the place and there's the guy and he's like, here's all these wands, one's gonna pick you. Was he a Jedi?
The droid?
Oh no, it's a droid.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can be a droid and you can kind of help out.
I mean, he didn't actually. Well, that's interesting. Could a droid build a lightsaber? Like, do they have the mechanical fine tuning to be able to put one in place?
Wasn't he in charge of building the hilts?
He helped the Jedi, like the younglings, out, but they actually built them.
Yeah, when you put the crystal in and you kind of like become one with your weapon or whatever. That's up to the Jedi, but
I mean, I think you could probably build a hilt without force sensitivity, but you're not going to make it work unless you get the crystal just right. That's the way I interpret it.
And the idea behind Kylo Ren's lightsaber, we don't know exactly that much about it, but the idea is that the crystal is cracked.
Yeah.
And that's why it has kind of like that crackling, and it needs the vents.
The popular theory right now is that he had his blue lightsaber that we see in The Last Jedi, because that hilt and his current hilt look very similar. So he probably bled his crystal, somehow overpowered it, cracked it, did something to it, made it unstable, and then he had to add those vents onto the side.
Maybe bled it, but not very well.
Right.
Because he's still
so conflicted.
Yeah.
We still don't know if that's true or not. I think it works for now. I'm happy to believe that. And then he was like, I guess I kind of originally thought that it was a bit of a hipster lightsaber where he's like, oh, I'm going to make mine look like an old ancient Jedi lightsaber.
Yeah. Instead,
it sounds like, oh, he needed to do that. And it was kind of a happy accident that it resembled the crossguard lightsaber, but we don't know yet.
Yeah.
That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon where I left you a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month gets you access to extra Star Wars Explained goodies like audio commentaries for the films, and the combined donations really go a long way in supporting the channel.
On to YouTube questions. Guyon Van Oors asks how we would have felt if the Yuuzhan Vong were the antagonists of the sequel trilogy.
I don't know. Kind of mixed. On the one hand, what we're getting now, I'm not super crazy about it because it's just a reboot of the First Order and a reboot of the Rebels, and that's familiar ground. I was someone that
reboot of the Empire?
Yeah, what did I say?
First Order?
Yeah, the First Order is a reboot of the Empire. So I was someone when they started doing the Yuuzhan Vong and the New Jedi Order, I was okay with it. A lot of people were like, this is crazy, and they didn't like it, and I was just like, it's new. So it took Star Wars in an interesting direction, and while I am enjoying the sequel trilogy, it is very samey. Like, I totally get that criticism. But the Yuuzhan Vong are very strange, and I don't know that they fit as well into the themes of Star Wars. It's hard to say. Like,
I would be afraid that Star Wars would turn into something more along the lines of so we recently just rewatched Edge of Tomorrow, or just those movies where, like, in District 9, like the movies that an alien race comes in and we don't know anything about them and they're really powerful, and it's just, it would get further and further away from, like you said, the themes of Star Wars, and it would be less about the people and more about these, what I would imagine would have to be CGI massive characters. And I don't know, I just think it would be less story driven and more action packed.
Maybe. It's hard to say, like, because they probably could have done an alien invasion story and still made it work. It's just hard to say without seeing it. So I guess my answer is that if they had gone with the Yuuzhan Vong, like, that doesn't immediately make me go, ugh, no Yuuzhan Vong. It's just kind of like, it would be an interesting, different take. And as long as the execution were pulled off, like, I would have been okay with it.
Yeah. I still think sometime in the future, spoilers for Rebels Season 4.
It's been out for months.
The end of Rebels. I still think it would be cool if at some point, whether it be a movie or a show or a book or something, Ezra and Thrawn pop back into the universe, and so do the Yuuzhan Vong, or an equally scary group of antagonists, and Ezra has to convince Thrawn to work with them and work with the rebellion. Like, it's kind of like the good guys and the bad guys are over here, and they have to kind of like band together to work against an even greater evil.
I do like those kinds of stories where, like, people have to, where antagonists have to say, let's put aside our differences and focus on this now. I am a fan of those stories. And I do think it's possible that Yuuzhan Vong could come back, because they have been hinting at threats in the unknown regions, and, like, Thrawn was always connected with the Vong in Legends, and he is still in the books mentioning there's some stuff out there that you don't know. Like, it could be anything. If it's the Vong or not, I don't know. But then again, they were almost in season 7 or 8 of the Clone Wars. They would have been heavily adapted, but it's still possible.
Yeah.
So
I don't want people to think that I feel like the Resistance and like the First Order would band together permanently. I just think, like, if something like that were to happen temporarily, everyone would have to say, hold on a second, we need to take care of this other problem. And
I don't think that the Vong are going to be introduced in episode 9 all of a sudden. I think that would just come out of nowhere. I think it's going to stay focused on Resistance versus First Order, and that'll be the major threat. But moving on beyond that, like, I'm okay if they just... I keep saying I want them to get weird with Star Wars, so, like, I'm okay if they try the Vong out.
Yeah, we've got, 2 more trilogies being worked on?
A trilogy and a series.
A trilogy and a series, and a TV show. And,
Who knows?
Endless possibilities. Dean Edwards wants to know if we think we could ever see Ventress in a movie.
I don't know. I kind of lean towards no, and the same with, like, Ahsoka. Well, we should say she was already in a movie. She was in the Clone Wars movie, but I think you mean live action. And it's hard with characters like that. Like, I want to kind of focus on Ahsoka, because if she were to be live action, I would feel weird if it were anyone but Ashley Eckstein. I guess it could be a CG character, but that feels weird. Like, I feel like they could do it with makeup.
Well, who was it that people were petitioning to play her?
Rosario Dawson.
Yeah.
Which... also, like, I think she would do a good job, but I'm like, if Ahsoka opens her mouth and I don't hear Ashley Eckstein, I'm going to be like, eh. And I guess they could do something like they're currently doing with Maul, with Ray Park and Sam Witwer. That just makes it more difficult. Mm-hmm. And then, like, Ventress becomes weird because she's even more not proportional to a human.
Yeah.
Like,
she's almost Kaminoan,
right?
Without the long neck.
Yeah, she's so skinny, and again, could be solved with CG, but I don't know. My gut feeling says probably not. I think they have told her story through the Clone Wars and the book Dark Disciple, and it's probably done.
Yeah. Zarliak asks if Episode 9 could have a special intro or outro to signal that this is the end of the Skywalker saga.
So I do kind of think that Episode 9 will be the end of the Skywalker saga. I think that would be nice to kind of wrap it all up the way George originally planned. 9 movies to tell the story of this family that, I mean, Shmi came first, but Anakin, and then his lineage. They were born of the Midichlorians, basically. And it's like this crazy powerful family and what they did to the galaxy. I think it would be nice if Episode 9 were the end, but I don't think that they're going to definitively say that for business reasons. I think that they would want to keep it open to do 10, 11, 12 in 10 or 15 years just in case.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's going to be some big the end at the end of episode 9 and be like, the Skywalkers are done. I just don't see that happening.
I don't either. I agree. But I could see them going in the direction of maybe... I think a Marvel movie did this. Not a, like, end scene, but just putting some text up that says something like, the Jedi will live on. Or the story of the Jedi will continue. Mm-hmm. ...
Sure.
Just like something to say stuff's still gonna be happening.
Yeah.
It may not be the Skywalkers, but
I don't even know if they're gonna do that. I don't know. I don't think they're gonna treat it any differently. Just even if it is the end of the Skywalkers, I think they're gonna be like, let's just keep this a little open-ended. But yeah.
I think it'll be a good ending. Hopefully, everybody's a little bit nervous right now. Hopefully they get a really good script together and nothing is left in question. We get a good, solid ending, good closure to the Skywalker saga.
Agreed.
Branster wants to know why Wedge and the other surviving pilots of the Battle of Yavin weren't given medals.
I think that's a load of BS, first of all. But the real answer is that they weren't main characters. And the end of that movie is all about, like, yay, Han and Luke and Leia. And also Chewie's here and 3PO and R2, which, like, Chewie should have gotten a medal. I mean, he did. That was retconned. Mm-hmm. R2 should have gotten a medal. He had his head blown off in the thing. Like, and we, as we have established, he is sentient. So that's really the only answer, is that Wedge wasn't a main character, and it would be weird if at the end of the story he were up there too, and everyone would be like, wait, who's that guy?
Maybe he did get a medal and they just sent it to him in the mail. He probably had some PTSD and wanted to stay home that day.
Sure, he almost got blown up by Darth Vader. He barely made it out. And then Yvonne Verlaine is another survivor. I mean, the obvious answer there being that she wasn't created at that point. But, yeah, I guess we could just retcon it the way Chewie got a medal after the fact. Like, let's just assume they did. Maybe they got different medals.
Yeah. They got a letter in the mail.
Yeah. Maybe they had a different ceremony for them. I don't know.
They just got a letter that says, good on you, mate.
You know what? I can't even say that. Like, well, they still could have had another ceremony, but Yvonne Verlaine was at the medal ceremony. So she was in the crowd watching them get medals while she didn't. And I don't know. Like, I do think that Wedge and Yvonne deserve it, but there's no really good actual in-universe answer.
Yeah. 1065 Chris asks if Grievous had survived the Clone Wars, would he have sided with the Empire or the Rebellion?
That is an interesting question. And I don't know that we can fully answer it in canon yet. For some reason, my gut answer for canon is that he would side with the Empire, just because he seems kind of different than what he was set up in Legends. But if we're talking Legends Grievous, who we know more about his motivations, I think that he would have sided with the Rebellion, maybe eventually. Like, I think he would have probably started his own resistance against the Empire. I
think it depends on whether or not Mace Windu is still around.
Why?
Isn't he the one that
crushed his lungs?
Yeah.
That was in Legends.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think that, like, part of him probably would have been happy that all the Jedi were killed, but once he started becoming oppressed again, I think he would have stood up for his people. Because in Legends, he was very motivated by his people, but it's hard to say, not really knowing as much about his history in canon.
Yeah, I don't see the Emperor treating him with respect and accepting him with open arms.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I think that's true.
Yeah. So he might just be kind of an outcast, working on his own. He might become like a crime lord of his own people, or I don't know. He might resurrect some old beat up battle droids and start his own gang.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't see him staying with the Empire. Now that we've talked it through, even in canon, like, I think he maybe wouldn't have sided with the rebellion so much, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend and all that. So I think he probably would have been more on the rebellion philosophy than with the Imperial. That's all the time we have for questions today. If you want to leave a question for next week's video, just leave it in the comments below or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. Now on to the giveaway. This is kind of just for our Atlanta locals only, or people willing to make the trip to Atlanta. A few months back, you might remember we did a giveaway for tickets to a local theater. They were doing a show called Wicket, and it was based on the musical Wicked, but it was telling the Battle of Endor from the Ewoks' point of view. Well, that same theater, they're called Dad's Garage, and they're amazing. They're doing a new show that they wanted us to do a giveaway for, so we're doing that. It is called Black Nerd, and it's kind of based on the show Atlanta.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Atlanta, it's a TV show by Donald Glover, and it's on FX, and it's basically about living in hip-hop culture, especially when you're just starting out as an artist and just kind of trying to survive that life.
And the show is kind of building off of that. The blurb that they have says, "What happens when a black kid prefers listening to Weird Al over Kendrick Lamar, attend Dragon Con over the Jay-Z concert, or Star Wars over Tyler Perry?" It's the TV show Atlanta meets Dragon Con.
There you go.
So if you want to enter the giveaway, there is a link in the description. Again, that's mostly for Atlanta locals. Sorry, that's kind of limited, but we're giving away 4 sets of 2 tickets, and the show opens on July 13th. So I think that's all there is. Yeah. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel,
and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.